We have one more speaker, Barak Kassar. No slides. Barak Kassar.
When you have two people in a room, face-to-face, talking, sitting, on a couch or sitting across a table, it's already pretty complicated to figure out whether you should trust one another. There's this constant calculus going on, checking out eye contact or posture or hair, facial hair, smile, clothes. We're always trying to figure out whether, what these things mean and whether we should trust somebody. And some people are also doing this other level of calculation, which is, should I trust myself? Like, should I trust my judgments? Because sometimes these judgments are, they're based on, they may be wrong, right? A lot of them are very culturally based. What you might think in one culture might not really mean the same thing in another. It's complicated anyway, face to face, but it gets a lot more complicated as soon as you put a layer of media between two people. So when you've got medium of some sort, whether it's a television or a website or a social network or a cereal box or an airplane carrying a little banner, above the beach in the summertime, when you have a message or an image being transmitted, not face-to-face, you suddenly now have to figure out whether not only do you trust that person and do you trust the message, you have to figure out whether you trust the medium itself. And just as an example, like we're here face-to-face, right? So you guys have certain clues. You've got my shoes, and you've got my jeans, and you've got my jacket, and you've got my hair, and you kind of figure out, what does that mean? If you're looking at this on the web through the live stream, maybe you can't actually see that. Maybe I'm not sure where the camera goes. Maybe it goes right here, so you don't have my shoes as a clue. And if you don't think that matters, how many times have you walked into a room and someone just does this to you? They kind of look you up and down? This happens. Very annoying. And I don't know if you do it to people. So people check you out, right? So people online, you don't have that opportunity. Online, you have, and maybe you're watching this now, maybe you're watching this in 2 years from now or 3 years from now, somewhere on YouTube. You have to figure out a bunch of other things to see whether you trust them or not. So you have to figure out whether you trust the website you're watching it on, right? And if it's YouTube, you have certain, do you trust their privacy policy? Do you trust the privacy policy of the internet service provider that is bringing, at your house or at your home office or at your company? Do you trust your employer to hold safe, the information of what you're watching at work? So maybe the video was on YouTube, but then somebody embedded it and put it on another site. Do you trust that? So these are things that you have to worry about and think about with media that you don't have to think about face-to-face. What I find interesting is that there needs to be a certain degree of media literacy that I'm not sure there necessarily is. And the talk earlier was all the statistics about people leaving reviews in social media. There are so many questions, and it's such a new medium that there's a tremendous lack of literacy. And media literacy is not really much of a topic. My stake in this is pretty clear. I have 2 children, so I'm very concerned about their being media literate. My goal is to have them be strong, independent citizens of this world, and I'd like them to know what they trust when they see it. I also am developing a website for children. I'm very interested in kids trusting, learning how to trust, and families letting kids figure it out and learn how to trust. And I also have a digital branding and communications firm, and so our job is to help organizations be trusted. And so it's a very important topic for me personally, and I think it's a very uncovered topic. I remember once I was with he's 13 now, but I was with him when he was about 5, and we were in a very vast breakfast cereal aisle in a supermarket, and he wanted to get the cereal box with Spider-Man on it. And we had a really, we did get it in the end because it was kind of a fun cereal to get. But we had a really kind of wonky conversation about who is Spider-Man, but how much it might cost to put Spider-Man on a cereal box, and why it might really be worth it. You're looking at an entire aisle of cereal. It might, and if that's the one he wants to choose, it might clearly there's a positive return on investment in putting Spider-Man on that cereal box. But for me, I felt there was an incredibly positive return on investment in talking with him about it, even though some of it might have been over its head at the time. But we've had many, many conversations about that over the years. And I've taken a very, I think, liberal stance in letting our kids play with media and learn about it and talk about it. It's an active topic. I think it's interesting to go back a little bit and talk about 3 eras of media. So the very first era of media was actually before there was any media. So if we go back to a time when there was no ability to really write anything down or print anything, all media was face-to-face. There was no ability to form a message and put it out in the world. The only way messages, ideas were spread were face-to-face. That's the era before media, the pre-media era. That's the era that our greatest stories really come from. Creation myths from basically every major or minor culture, biblical stories. And so much of our media today, our electronic media, Hollywood films, are actually built on those kind of foundational stories that have lasted for a very, very long time. And it's kind of interesting because people trust those stories. There's data, and now I don't know how much I trust this data because it's a very high number, but there's data that says that 63% of people in the United States believe the Bible literally. Like they believe those stories literally happened, right? So, and it's a very curious number for me. Even if that number is extremely high, that's a lot of people that really trust these stories. And thinking about it, those stories were told face to face forever, for the longest time before they were ever written down and before they were ever printed and mass produced. And so they were told in a very trusted environment. And they were probably slightly honed every time they were told. They were probably just, I'm telling it to you. I'm reading you. I can kind of slightly adjust it for you. You tell it to him, to her, and so on. And they're very optimized stories for humans. There was a real trust in those stories. But media evolved. Media was actually eventually developed. And there became a time when people could actually craft the story and shape it and send it out in the world. So it started out by writing. Their very first sort of reproduction houses could hand copy a manuscript, a few a day. They could hand print a few hundred a day. They could, the early presses could print a few thousand manuscripts a day. And slowly but surely, you actually had mass media. And a new thing, a new skill developed. The ability to actually create and shape and manage an image. That didn't happen before. And so this new profession of image maker came along. And that really grew and grew and grew till you had images created, images to sell ideas, images to sell votes, images to sell product. And that became the era of mass media. And we're still very much in the era of mass media, but it's changing a lot. And people, you hear a lot of talk of trusted brands. People try to measure how much brands are trusted. This became the currency. And people who were paid handsomely to create images that people trusted and to make sure that there was no hint of distrust that ever crept into the story. But that is really different. We kind of at the edge where digital media, and we're now entering this very, very new world and very interesting and powerful world of social media, which looks a lot like the early pre-media times of people talking face-to-face, right? Word of mouth was the original media, and now this is the current currency. The idea of digital media started to take mass media and chunk it down and target so we could each see ads that were targeted to ourselves. We've all gotten direct mail that have our first name either spelled correctly or incorrectly 30 times throughout the letter. And it's really hard to trust that after a while. And the advent of social media has given people power to start poking holes in the mass media images. So we all have this power now to kind of put checks and balances on people trying to create images. And so you see stories either in the news or on blogs of, for example, large petroleum companies sending out, instructions for how to Photoshop a helicopter pilot, maybe not in front of a particular gulf or body of water. And that information, that stuff that was very opaque before, is forced out into the open. And so brands have no choice anymore but to open themselves up. And we as people have a lot of power. We have the means of production and the means of distribution to be on par with them. But it's not. Social media is a very interesting and complicated advent because it's really hard to know what to trust now. There's a lot of the means to create image is something that we all have the ability to do. So, for example, Photoshop is still actually a very expensive product, but there are free image manipulation tools online that anyone can use. We're talking about a new media where it's hard to necessarily, everything's so new, it's easy to be fooled. Right? It's very easy to look like a bank, sending out an email asking for your credit card, and it's very easy to be fooled that way. It's a very complicated environment to help people learn to know what to trust. And so I believe strongly that the best way to do it is to let people just play with it, and especially let younger people play with it, and not try to protect them so much, but actually trust that by them getting involved with it, they will learn their own method of trusting, and they'll develop their own judgment and their own form of street smarts. And in preparation for knowing I was coming down here, I had one conversation and I overheard one conversation, and I'm going to close with those. I asked my 13-year-old how he knows what to click on and what not to click on. And he said to me, I don't click on anything, like he didn't even think. He said, I don't click on anything to do with acai berries. And I had no idea what that meant at first, and I thought about it. And I've seen these little ads. And apparently he's had about 10 or 12 people on his Facebook wall have basically been manipulated by an acai berry app or page where they had to click on something, and it put basically spam for acai berry on his wall. And I said, well, how did you know that? And he just said, he has incredible judgment. He said, people were saying things on my wall that they would never say. So he knows this, and he knows it because he's learned it, and he's learned it because he's been experiencing it. I said to him, hoping that he'd bolster my argument, I said, do you think that's because you've been allowed to use this media? And I thought he actually supported my argument, but in a way that I didn't expect. He said, even if you didn't let me on it, I would have gone and made a fake account, and I would have learned, I'd been on it myself. So that's a little ironic at a session on trust, but it's absolutely true. And so I left that. I dropped him at school. I went to the train to come down here. I was walking to the train, and I was walking from the Noe Valley neighborhood of San Francisco down to BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, to get down here to Palo Alto. And I was walking along one of the traveled routes, the commuter routes for Silicon Valley commuters and workers. And I was walking behind this man and a woman, and he was explaining his job to her. I guess he had a new job. I was kind of a couple of feet behind and just listening. Sorry. And he was saying, I have this job, and my job is to kind of give a voice to this website that we're building. And, I take the strategy document, and I try to add a layer of believability. And I thought, all right, this is what he's up against. And I'm really glad he's developing the tools on his own to figure it out. So thank you very much.
See, you didn't need slides.